This Necromancer freeze summoner build is insane. You can have constant uptime on your minions so they're fighting alongside you always. You can constantly freeze enemy mobs so you do not take any damage yourself and you can dish out free damage onto them. You can also constantly stagger bosses really easily as well, which gives you free time to do all the damage you want. You can lower the cooldowns of your abilities effortlessly, which allows you to spam abilities all day long. And this build does not have a problem with resource management, so you do not have to worry about running out of essence. If all of that sounds great and you want to try it out yourself, then this is the video for you. Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over a Necromancer freezing summoning build. So I actually already created a Necromancer guide already in a previous video, so you can go check that out. There's nothing wrong with that build. That build works just fine. It's totally okay. But I got some new legendary items or new unique items that have changed up my build since then. For the most part, the build is pretty much the same, but there are a few tweaks here and there to account for the new legendaries or unique items that we've gotten. Like I said in my other video, I'm not going to say that this is the best build that you can go right now because I don't really have first-hand experience on trying out all the builds. I still have yet to get all the legendary items to actually play around with the build because I do believe that legendary aspects do kind of make or break builds. So I don't really have a lot of bone stuff or whatever, so I'm still farming up some legendaries. Until then, I'm just going to play around with some minion builds, and I do love summoning minions. That's why I played Necromancer, so I'm having a lot of fun playing that. Obviously, as the name suggests, the point of this Necromancer build is to summon minions, and it's also to freeze the enemy. Freezing the enemy lets us get free damage off onto the enemy, and we don't take as much damage in return. I will say that you might be sacrificing your damage for the sake of utility, that is freezing the enemy, but it definitely is well worth it because you definitely have a much more chill time, no pun intended, playing through it and getting through the dungeons. When it comes to group play, this build is amazing. I would say that this build actually really shines when you're playing with a group of people or with your friends. The reason why I say this is because you can constantly stagger the boss really quickly, and staggering the boss means they're stunned for a few seconds, and that just means free damage for your team. This build will cover a lot of things that you will want. It has AoE damage, it has single target damage from your minions, your items and your skills will give you quite a lot of survivability, your minions as well for the tankiness. You also have the utility of freezing, which is good in solo play, but even more amazing in group play. And you also don't really need to worry about resource management or your essence because this build doesn't really use that much at all. And I do just want to quickly repeat myself from my other videos that if you are still leveling up a character, then the best build that you can go is to just use whatever legendary items that the game gives you. Anyways, let's get into the Necromancer summoning freeze build. I'm just going to go over the legendary items as always because I believe, again, the legendary items or aspects kind of make or break a build. So my items are pretty similar to my other video, but I'll still run over it because there are some few new things. So for my helmet, I have 2 extra skeletal warriors, that's great. The next one is my chest piece, which is when you hit a crowd controlled enemy, there's up to a 48% chance for that crowd control effect to spread to another affected enemy, so this is a lucky hit. So that'll be great for our freezing. When we freeze one unit, we can have a chance to spread it around. Our next one is our gloves, which is while Army of the Dead is active, your minions gain 85% attack speed and take 90% reduced damage, which is really great because sometimes in the harder difficulties, like tier 21 or whatever for me, at the moment I'm level 63, sometimes my minions just aren't strong enough and they just like die, especially when they're standing in like big AoE type of poisons or whatever. Like my minions are not able to survive, so this is gonna be really good, and this also explains my build later down the line. I also do have these sacred unique gloves, which could also be very good as well because they do have some freeze duration increase and they have a lucky hit passive where up to 20% chance to freeze enemies for 2 seconds. Now freezing the enemy is really great and it definitely works well with that chest piece which spreads a freeze, but I just felt like if we have too many freeze effects, then what's the point, because you're just gonna keep constantly freezing them but not doing any damage. I felt like with these gloves, my Army of the Dead will give my minions a lot of attack speed, which will increase their damage, and on top of that we get reduced damages. Probably the more important part because generally when I'm versing higher tier nightmare dungeons, the problem that I find is that my minions just die off because when it comes to minions, it's kind of like a snowball thing. If you have minions, you're chilling. If you're not having minions, then you're gonna die. So having these damage reduction gloves for minions is very important, I feel, because when you're versing a lot of elite monsters and they have poison or these AoE moments, it just like completely shreds your minions and the healing is just not enough to keep them alive, like from your priest. So I feel like the Army of the Dead is gonna be good, and we can actually have pretty high uptime with Army of the Dead, but I'll explain that later with my skill build. For the pants, we have while you have 7 or more minions, your minions gain 80% increased damage reduction, which is again really good because when we're versing high tier nightmare dungeons, a lot of the minions are just going to do too much damage to your army, so having a damage reduction is really good. And that works really well with our rings and all, which I'll get into later. For my boots, I have your maximum number of skeletal mages increased by 2. That's pretty self-explanatory and really good for obvious reasons. For my weapon, I have an ancestral unique 2-handed scythe, and for the passive, it gives us your darkness skills chill enemies for up to 40%, and for the lucky hit, your darkness skills have up to 100% chance to generate 4 additional essence against frozen targets. This is an amazing weapon, and it's obviously going to work really well with all the freeze mechanics that will be going on. For my amulet, I have every 10 seconds your skeletal mages cast a blizzard that deals cold damage continuously, chills enemies for 8% over 6 seconds, which is really good for us. For my ring, I have each time one of your summoning minions damages an enemy, they gain 14 attack speed for 3 seconds, up to 42%. And for my other ring, I have your skeletons gain increased damage while alive, up to 23%, up to 10 seconds, which is also why it's really important for us to keep our skeletons alive. Now for my skeletons, it's the same as my other videos. For my warriors, I'm going the Reaper path, and I'm going with this one where Reaper attacks against enemies who are immobilized, slowed, stunned, or vulnerable, reduce the cooldown of their powerful wind-up attack by 2 seconds, which is going to be really good for our freezing because it works well with that. And we have some attack speed type of legendary items, so they're going to be hitting more. The faster they hit, the more they're going to get their cooldowns down, so they can get that big powerful hit in. For our mages, we're obviously going to be going into the cold mages so we can freeze, and I'm going to one where enemies who are frozen by or damaged while frozen by your cold mages primary attacks are made vulnerable for 4 seconds. So vulnerability makes the enemies take 20% extra damage, so that's lovely. And again, because we are changing the skills, you'll see later that we're not going to be using a lot of essence, so we're not going to be needing a lot of the resources. We don't need this one anymore. So having the vulnerability is going to be extra damage, which is amazing. For the golem, I've decided to sacrifice it because I just don't really feel like golem does all that much. I know they buffed an iron golem and gives you vulnerability, but we already have that from my cold mages. So I decided to sacrifice it, and we're going for this one where we deal a 30% increased critical strike damage, but you lose the ability to summon a golem. Last time I had the attack speed one for the Sever, but we're not going to go with Sever. We're going to be going Corpse Explosion, so we don't need the attack speed. So having the increased critical strike damage will be amazing. Now let's get into the skills, and I'm not going to be talking over like the ordering of it, like from 1 to 50. How you allocate your points is up to you. I'm just going to quickly go over the skills and passes we have, and then after that I'll explain why we go these things. So the first one we're going to get is Reap for our basic ability, and then we're going to get a Huge Flash passive. We're not going to be getting any of the core skills because we don't need them, we're not using them. For our next one, we're going to be getting Corpse Explosion, and we're going to get into the Darkness one where it gives us the damage over time, and then we're going to get the ones that increase our Skeleton Warriors tankiness. Down in this section, we're going to get Skeletal Mage Mastery, which increases our Skeletal Mage's tankiness, and then we're going to get Decrepify and the passives over here. It slows the enemy, it makes us take less damage, and the cooldown is going to be really good, and I'll explain why later. Down here, we're going to be maxing out all the Darkness passives, so it's just like extra damage, more movement speed, more utility, whatever. And then down here, we're going to get the Army of the Dead ultimate ability, and we're going to get all the passives that come along with it, along with getting all these passives over here that increase our minions' survivability and the damage. And then for the key passives, we're going to get Calend's Addict. After you have not taken damage in the last 30 seconds, your minions gain 15 attack speed, and while you have at least 7 minions, this bonus is doubled. Now, I didn't go this in my other video, but I'll explain why I have this one in this build. So now let's run through the build again, but this time explaining why we go all these things and how they all work well together. So the first one we have is our basic ability, which is Reap, and the reason why we have that is because it creates a corpse. This corpse is important because it's for our Corpse Explosion, and it's not for summoning, because if we need to summon, we have our Army of the Dead. The Army of the Dead's passive, when we get it raises our army again, so if they're dead, we get it all together again. Army of the Dead has a passive that raises our skeleton, mages, and warriors, so we don't need to resummon them at all. It's completely covered by Army of the Dead, and we can reduce the cooldown of Army of the Dead with Decrepify, because when it comes to Decrepify with this passive, when you lucky hit, you have a 15% chance to reduce your active cooldown by 1 second, so that does work with Army of the Dead. And when you hit a whole mob of minions, like in a whole cluster, this is gonna proc a lot, and you can get your Army of the Dead cooldown really down really quickly. Now for the Darkness passives, it's pretty obvious why we're going all this Darkness stuff, because we're going to be focusing a lot on Darkness damage. Our weapon makes our Darkness damage chill the enemy, so that's why. Down here for Calend's Addict, the reason why I didn't like this passive was because I just felt like when you're bossing or just in a dungeon fighting a whole heap of mobs, you're just never not gonna take damage, right? Like, you're just gonna be taking damage from something. Maybe you're standing in a puddle, something's gonna be hitting you at some point, so it's not gonna be working at all. But I just found like when you're going a freeze build and you stand back and let your minions do all the work, you can kind of stand back and be safe, and you get that attack speed bonus. So I feel like Calend's Addict can work with this build. If you feel like you're taking damage and the uptime for Calend's Addict is just not up to what you want it to be, then you can take Shadow Blight. It's up to you. You do what you want. For Paragon Paragon Board, the first node that I got is Control. So you and your minions deal 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies, or instead 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen enemies. So obviously this is going to be amazing with all the freezing and chilling that's going to be happening. In my second board, I decided to go the cult leader one. I haven't popped into it directly yet. I decided to go for like the damage reduction type of stuff, and for my other one, my other node, I went Dead Razor. So whenever your minions deal damage to an enemy, that enemy takes 1% increased damage from you and your minions, up to 12%. We're going to be doing a lot of damage over time and all that, so this is going to work really well. Also for this glyph socket, Paragon nodes within range gain 20% bonus to their minion damage and damage reduction modifier, so it's going to work really well with this. So normally this is at 5%, but we're getting 6% instead, and normally this is 10%, but we're getting 12% instead. And then over here for this node, it's just like extra minion damage and attack speed, so more minion stuff is great. I'm still going to play around with the Paragon board. The reason why I'm going all these damage reduction stuff is, again, I just feel like when it comes to harder difficulty and like higher tier nightmare dungeons, your minions can die quite often, and it's just like nearly impossible to keep them alive and without some damage reduction. So this is what I'm going at. If you want to go into more damage, then feel free to do that, but when it comes to high difficulty, I do feel like you have a harder time keeping your minions alive. Like I said before, I feel like minion builds are very snowbally. Like if you have your minions alive and you keep them up, then it's great, but if they are constantly dying, then it's nearly impossible to clear like a dungeon, because you just cannot resummon your minions constantly whilst being damaged and like them dying, and then you're not going to be able to get your skeletal priest healing them because you need to get the max cap of minions, but that's not going to be happening because they're constantly dying as you're summoning them, and then you're going to eventually run out of corpses and you're not going to be able to summon them. So this is why I like to get the damage reduction. But again, if you want to go into more damage oriented stuff, then feel free to do that. You do you. So when it comes to AoE damage, Necromancers don't have a lot of AoE from the minions, because minions for the most part do single target damage. I think the most substantial AoE damage that we would get is from the blizzard that we get from our cold skeletons from legendary items, so there's that. But even then, it's really hard to clear out some mobs, so that's why Corpse Explosion is really good. As you will see in the gameplay footage, we get to spam Corpse Explosion because of the lucky hit passive that we had. So it's a very snowball type of playstyle. If you have one corpse, that's honestly kind of all you need in a cluster, because one corpse getting exploded will proc lucky hit on each minion, and that lets us have a chance to proc another corpse from those minions. So if you have like 10 monsters in front of you and you use a Corpse Explosion on one of them, because of your passive, each one of those minions will have a chance to proc another corpse, and then it's just gonna keep on snowballing and circling around, and you know, you keep getting more chances from there to get more corpses, which is why you'll see like that's how we get to spam all these Corpse Explosions, even though we don't really have any abilities that kind of generate corpses. It's purely from the lucky hit passive that we have. If you have a look at our Army of the Dead's cooldown, you will see that the cooldown is going down really quickly in a whole heap of mobs, because you know, the lucky hit is just hitting on everyone. So not only are we going to get all these corpses and all these Corpse Explosions for free, we're also getting a decrepified lucky hit reduced cooldown moment on our Army of the Dead, so we can constantly spam our Army of the Dead. In one of the clips, you can actually see that my Army of the Dead's cooldown goes down so quickly that I'm casting it back to back, because there's just so many AoE moments that's happening, so many monsters, so my lucky hit is just constantly proccing. You'll also see in these big mobs that everything is constantly getting frozen and chilled, so they're being slowed down and they have a hard time reaching you. You also get to freeze the elite monsters constantly, which is amazing because freezing them is free damage for us, you know, free time to do whatever we want to them. I will say that when you have a big cluster of mobs, it's better to kind of like gather them together and then go off to one side or a corner, and then have your minions kind of gather up, so everything, all the focus fire is like pinpointed at one section. Because if all your minions are all around and all the enemies are all around, then the focus fire just becomes all over the place, and your freezing kind of becomes inconsistent, and also the AoE damage, because we want to do Corpse Explosions, so we don't really want everything to be all over the place. So I would say to kind of gather all the minions, run off to your side, and then do all your AoE moments there. Like I said, you're kind of sacrificing your damage for utility, so this is not going to be like the most damage out there in the whole entire game, or even for like any Necromancer build, because you know, we're going to be playing the slow game of chilling, freezing, and doing our damage over time. But you know, that's still okay as long as we kind of get through the dungeon and don't don't die, like it's chill. In an AoE scenario, it's not bad. Like obviously you can see that our Corpse Explosion is proccing a lot, and we get to get our Army of the Dead's cooldown really low, so we can constantly spam it, which is why I like having the gloves, which makes our Army of the Dead increase the attack speed and damage reduction of our minions. Again, like if you wanted to, you could go the Sacred Unique that increases the freezing, but I like to get the Army of the Dead attack speed so our minions can do more damage. In a bossing scenario, you probably would have noticed that getting corpses is a little bit difficult, so we're not going to be able to spam as many Corpse Explosion and therefore not get our lucky hits for our Army of the Dead or just, you know, the corpse generation. However, in a single target moment, your minions are just going to be barraging the enemy and constantly freezing the boss, so, you know, you still have your single target covered because of your minions. Like, you can kind of just stand back and do whatever you want. Like, even if you're doing one Corpse Explosion here and there, like, that's okay. You might have also noticed that because of a Decrepify reducing our cooldowns, that it reduces our Blood Mist cooldown, so we get to use our Blood Mist a lot, but it also reduces our dash cooldown, so we get to dash all over the place. This is even better if you can get like boots or whatever items that can increase your dash charges. Right now I only have 1 charge, but if you can get like 3 charges, like you can definitely get a lot of dashes like quickly because it just reduces your dash cooldown. So you will see in some gameplay footage that I'm like constantly just jumping around. Not that I'm like jumping into any particular spot with any like intention or whatever, I'm literally just spamming it because I want to, but that's something very nice to have in mind where you can like just get out of danger because of your dash and Blood Mist. So this is a very, very safe build. I also just want to mention, because I know someone is going to point this out, that my essence is going down really quickly, and I did say in my build that this does not require a lot of essence, it does not require a lot of resource management because your abilities don't really cost anything. And it's true. The reason why my essence is going down so quickly is because of my Decrepify. I'm literally just spamming it, not that I have to because it lasts for like 8 seconds, so I don't have to spam it, but I'm literally just spamming it because I'm just rolling my fingers through like 2, 3, and 4, my buttons, my abilities. The reason why I'm spamming all my abilities is because there's just so much that's happening on the screen, and the Corpse Explosion does not help that at all. It covers the screen and just makes everything so dark. Like when I'm playing with my friends, I had them complain to me about like how they literally cannot see anything because of the Corpse Explosion, so hopefully Diablo kind of like fixes that or changes that. But like, yeah, I'm just spamming because I just want to, and even if like my essence goes down to 0, like I can just generate that back pretty easily and just, you know, be more careful with my Decrepify. Like you literally only need to cast it like once every like 6, 8 seconds, right? Like I'm spamming it because I just want to. I don't lose anything, it's like whatever. But you know, if you like don't want to spam as much, like you can just play it very chill and like press Decrepify like once every 8 seconds or whatever. You might have also noticed that we have a pretty high uptime on our skeletons, like staying alive. And even if they do die off, we can quickly resummon them because of our Army of the Dead. And then we can also get our Army of the Dead pretty quickly because of a Decrepify. So you're going to be having your Army of the Dead or your minions constantly up, so you're never gonna be like alone ever, really, unless you're versing like a really, really high tier dungeon or a boss that like wipes out your team constantly. Like you're gonna be pretty good in terms of uptime for your minions, so that's gonna be amazing for us as well. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this build. As you can see, it has amazing AoE damage, it has amazing single target damage, constant freezing, you don't have to worry about resource management, the cooldowns are cooldowning, like you get to spam your abilities constantly. You have pretty good survivability. Not only do you have low cooldowns on your Blood Mist or your dashing, but you know, you don't really have to take any damage because of your minions, and you can heal up your minions, you can bring them back up, you know, with the Army of Death, so you have a lot going with this build. Like I said, it's a pretty similar Necromancer build as my other video that I did, but you know, as I get more legendaries or unique items or whatever, my build changes and I'm gonna play around with more stuff, and this is something I found to be a bit more effective or more fun to use. I will be posting more Necromancer videos and builds. I'll be trying out more stuff because I picked up some more legendary items, so I cannot wait to play around with that. I love theory crafting and I love playing around with different builds, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, I do hope that you try out this build for yourself. Let me know how it feels and what your experience is with it. I know that some of you also have your own builds, so let me know what you have in the comment section below. Some of you have asked me what are my thoughts on the Golem, or more specifically the Iron Golem with the vulnerability. Personally, I don't really feel like the Iron Golem buffs are like that amazing. It's like a 3-second vulnerability smash like every few second cooldown, so there is that. I need to try it out more. I personally still do not like Golem, and we also have vulnerability from my cold mages in this specific build, so there is that. Anyways, thank you for watching, and like and subscribe this video if you like it, and if you want to see more of this stuff. I'll be making a lot more Diablo content because I love the game, and I might sprinkle in some other games like League of Legends or whatever here and there, so stick around for that. I do also stream on Twitch, so you can check the description box below and come join in and say hello. My community generally consists of LGBT folk or queer folk in general, so come in and say hello if you're part of the LGBT gang. Like, I know Diablo can be kind of like a cis hetero type of like community, so you know, if I can yassify the Diablo community, that would be amazing, and I would love for you to join me. Even if you're not part of the LGBT community, I would still love for you to come join in my stream and say hello. Obviously, I want to expand my community, not just like the LGBTs, so come in, say hello, and let's have some fun together. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you have a lovely day and a lovely time playing Diablo 4. Bye bye!